You're looking at a snapshot of the market action across Asia. Very mixed today with a downside bias. This is after a flat lead from Wall Street. The Nikkei 225 down 0.1%. The Kospi off 0.5%. Here in Hong Kong, managing a small positive bias, 25,184. Shanghai is hovering at a 10-year high, 3,732. The TAIEX backing off a record high that it hit yesterday, 24,419, down 0.4%. Taking a look at shares of Pop Mart, pulling back from the record high it hit yesterday. The stock's been on a spectacular run, climbing over 550% in the last year as its hallmark Labubu soft toy continues to find new audiences. Elaine Yu has more on that phenomenon. Elaine.
It's been fascinating tracing the different life stages of Labubu. It was so big in China and then across Asia, but now in the West as well. And there's even a knockoff version of Labubu now. So that's quite a stunning reversal from when China was known for having its knockoff versions from other products. But the reversal is what's happening with Labubu now. And what's also striking is that this global craze with Labubus happened despite all the geopolitical tensions around tariffs, targeting Chinese origin goods. But it's not just one company. We all know about the Chinese EVs and AI models that have highlighted China's technological prowess. And some of these sectors have received a lot of state support. And in some cases, China's government has been explicit about pushing its soft power with directives for companies to tell positive stories about China. But in this case, Labubu's wide appeal has been set to be attributed to its ambiguous gender and ethnicity, and its genesis is more multicultural as well, given that it's the designer of Labubu is a Hong Kong-born artist who was raised in the Netherlands. But there are also other cultural products, for example, video games that really highlight proudly their Chinese culture and heritage. So let's take a look at some of the new cultural exports from China that are taking off today.
For years, China has had an image problem it couldn't shake off, synonymous with cheap exports and heavy censorship. Today, though, China is becoming cool. Chinese coffee chains are popping up in New York. Chinese video games are generating billions in revenue. Even Sea Beauty is expanding its global reach.
But perhaps the most surprising breakout in China's cultural rise is a toy.
Labubus are everywhere. Pop Mart's ugly cute $30 keychains are spotted on the bags of Lady Gaga, Rihanna, Blackpink's Lisa, as well as legions of fans worldwide. Just a few weeks ago, Pop Mart opened its first store in Germany, the newest addition to over 500 stores globally. The toy maker's star is rising, forecasting a 350% surge in profit in the first half of 2025. Goldman Sachs says that long-term, Pop Mart's sales could reach over $11 billion. The company is even challenging Japanese legacy brands like Sanrio and Bandai Namco.
Pop Mart's success isn't a fluke. With dozens of characters and the addictive appeal of the blind box where buyers don't know what they're getting, the company has hit the sweet spot of emotional spending at a time of uncertainty.
One of the key themes is IP, or chasing for small pleasure. This is something really the young generation love. And you actually find that not only the Chinese, Asia young generation like these small cute things, global young generation, they love this.
Pop Mart isn't an outlier in shifting the zeitgeist east. The video game Black Myth Wukong, based on the Chinese folk story Journey to the West, sold 20 million units in its first month of release in August 2024, making it one of the fastest-selling titles of all time. Genshin Impact, a Chinese anime-style game, now generates more revenue outside China than at home, with players in Japan and the US leading the charge according to data by Statista. Yaling Jiang, a consumer analyst, says young people are generally viewing China and Chinese brands more favorably.
I think the best outcome of these consumer products is that people can see through the negative filter of them being Chinese, and they can just see them for what they are.
In the global soft power rankings, consulting group Brand Finance says China is moving up the index. It's overtaken the UK for the first time and is just behind the US. From toys to games to lip gloss, it's the small things that are giving China a glow up.
And we are watching out for earnings coming out from Pop Mart today. That usually happens after the market close, and they have already indicated a 350% jump in profits. They'll be watching out for that. Joining us now to talk more about this is Joe Ngai. He is chairman of Greater China of McKinsey and joins us around the set. Joe, good morning and welcome to CNBC.
Good morning.
We want to talk about soft power, and we were hearing about Labubu, this dramatic rise in this Chinese company with its toys. This really marks a shift for China from being a manufacturer to a cultural innovator. Can you talk about that?
Well, first of all, I think it's really amazing how this Chinese toy has, really gone around the world. But I think that what we need to take a step back and say that, well, China is 18% of global GDP. If you think about why this phenomenon, it's because it's the first time it's really happening like this, right? If Chinese soft power was all that great, then basically we wouldn't be surprised about this, right? Pop Mart and this Labubu, I think, is interesting because it either heralds in a new phenomenon around Chinese soft power and Chinese companies, soft power going around the world and brands and all that, or it's just a one-time sensation and it's not going to happen. Now, I believe that this is the beginning of a long journey about it. If you think about Korea, K-pop, right, and all that, that's really been, K-beauty has really been around the world, right? Japan, 20 years ago and all that really caught the world by storm, yeah? China has always been hard manufacturing, goods, phones, refrigerators, TVs. Finally, in Labubu, we see something that's a little bit more unique, and I hope that that's a bit of a beginning of more to come.
So this is toys that we're seeing, but it is not just toys, because when we look at the digital and media space, there's also TikTok, and that has taken the world by storm, the U.S. in particular, and we've watched how it's turned into a political hot potato as well. So is this also a form of soft power?
Well, I think that if you think about what is actually happening, I think from the consumer standpoint, I think that they love it, right? So TikTok, around the world, I think that you see billions of customers, right? WeChat, actually the app, is really popular in many places, right? Labubu is really out there. I think that the differentiation between consumers who love these products, but there's also companies who fear the Chinese companies that are competing with them. So I think when we think about soft power, like who is it we're talking about? Is it consumers on products? Or is it companies who are competing against Chinese companies? And I think that these two are actually quite the opposite right now in terms of how they view the welcomeness of this Chinese power coming out.
And what about the U.S. ownership that the U.S. is pushing for, this regulatory distrust to the national security concerns?
Well, look, I think geopolitics is everywhere right now. And I think that whether it's Chinese companies or other companies actually in the U.S., I think that you all have to, cater to actually what the politics of that place. But if I think about Chinese actually going abroad right now, I do think that there needs to be a shift. I think previously, Chinese actually made great value for money products. They made, cheap products. They made, great products. But at the same time, I think that there is a shift that they need to think about how to be a great global corporate citizen. I think that all the things that global corporates actually do, how do you work with local communities, how do you work with local politicians, how do you think about regulation, how do you think about all these? I think that Chinese companies, as they venture forward in this more globalization, I do think that there is, call it there in primary school right now, but there's still many, many more steps to go until they become truly global companies.
And you mentioned this could be the start of Chinese pop culture becoming more global. So we know Labubus, of course, but also video games like Black Myth Wukong, they're huge, even outside China as well. So do you see a through line or any common features about these products? Is it because they're maybe more apolitical in nature?
Well, first of all, I think that if you think about the global population right now, I do think that people are quite happy to see global products, right? I mean, think about, I think the Korean, the Korean dramas are a great phenomenon, right? Whether, you understand Korean or not, right? You actually watch it, right? K-pop, right? You don't understand Korean, but you love the songs. So I do think, if you think about the pop culture right now, I think that actually language and all that is less of an issue now. It's around how do you capture the audience, how do you think about the emotional value. All these companies in China are innovating every single day to capture the 1.3 billion customers in China. What actually works in there, there's no reason why it's not going to work globally. So when you see these, is this a surprise? Well, it's a surprise why it's coming so late. It's a surprise why it hasn't happened before, right? But right now, as it goes outside, I think that, well, they're getting a taste of what actually 1.3 billion customers in China has been seeing already for decades.
Yeah, it's a good point that the Chinese landscape is so competitive for these companies. They just have to innovate.
That's right. I mean, for the longest time, I think the companies, my clients in China, they were so obsessed with the competition in China that they almost didn't, it was a second priority to think about, going global. I think in the past 2 years, I've seen unprecedented interest for Chinese companies to search for new markets, new growth, new customer segments outside, because the domestic market, it's not saturated, but it's actually quite mature now, right? So therefore, they're venturing outside for the markets, and that's why you're seeing the doubling down efforts for Chinese companies to go overseas right now.
I just want to follow up on that, and this is happening despite there being a trade war and some negative impressions of China.
No, it is absolutely true. I think that right now probably is the toughest time for Chinese companies to go overseas, given the scrutiny, given all the, kind of heightened anxiety around the competitiveness. But there has never been as much of a desire as of right now to go overseas. So you have these two things happening at the same time. And I think that, they will have to learn. I think that this is, from my perspective, the beginning of a learning journey that should have happened 10 years ago, but that time China was growing way too fast and way too profitable that people just didn't focus on overseas markets.
So China's role as a global trend center, what is the implications for trade, for culture, and its geopolitical influence?
I actually think it's a good thing. I actually think that for more global audience to understand what's actually happening in China, for Chinese companies to adjust to the global rules of how to do trade and this soft power, I think is actually a very good phenomenon that we're seeing, right? Previously, if you were a factory owner in China, all you want to do is make the cheapest, the best product over here, and then the world will take your product. Right now, they got to think a lot more differently. They got to think about, do I need joint venture partners? Do I need to think about foreign ownership? Right? Do I need to think about how to become a much better citizen, right, for your community? Do I have to enter into your industrial ambitions and figure out how do I play a role in it instead of competing against you? So I do think that there are a lot more considerations right now for Chinese companies as they venture overseas, and I think it's a good thing, right? There's a learning journey here. There'll be lots of hiccups, but I think in 10 years' time, when we look back, I think this is only the beginning, right, of this kind of longer journey as they become global companies.
And what's also striking to me that for many of these Chinese companies going global as well, a lot of their consumers are young. So how powerful do you think young consumers are as a force in China and outside its border? Because it maybe not enough to tip the macro picture, but with pockets of opportunities there?
Yeah, no, I think Chinese companies are very, very good with young population because they innovate very quickly, because they make it so easy to try you out first, right? Chinese companies are very good with having a teaser offer that is actually very good value that, helps you to change, yeah? So I do think that they work very well with young consumers. But if you think about even the Labubus or the Wukongs, it's not only the teenagers, right? If you think about like who is actually carrying Labubu, you see David Beckham, you see others. I mean, these are not teenagers, right? These are actually, pretty mature people, right? So I do think that soft power, let's not think about it's only like a teenage phenomenon, right? I mean, if you think about even, the Sheins of the world and all that, the consumers are actually, the value for money. I have a great kind of cultural icon. It appeals to your emotional self. That's what we all need. It's not, it's not the privilege of a 15-year-old, right? We can also enjoy those goods too.
Do you have a Labubu?
I'm trying to get one.
Yeah. We're going to just stay right there, Joe. We have lots more with you coming up after the break. And my thanks to Elaine Yu as well for joining that conversation. The China Connection taking a short break. We'll be right back. Shares of Swatch are falling 3% in Zurich trade yesterday. The Swiss watchmaker has scrapped an ad campaign for its Essentials collection after heavy criticism in China. One of its ads featured a model making his eyes slanted and small, which is considered a racist taunt towards East Asians. Over the weekend, Swatch issued an apology on Instagram and Weibo in both English and Chinese. It has not issued any other comments since. And we are back with Joe Ngai, chairman of Greater China of McKinsey. And Joe, just your reaction and response to what happened with Swatch. It's kind of unbelievable that they would allow this kind of ad to take place in today's day and age, right?
Well, look, it's not the first time, it won't be the last. I think that we've seen many of these, in China, but also, around the world, right? I do think that for advertisers and for companies these days, I think that being ultra sensitive, right, around these is important. But I think that, look, this is not the first time, right? And it will continue to happen. I think that we just need to all understand that in this day and age, right, with social media, with how things can be magnified, I think that it's a different bar, right, if you are a corporate, to think around how to appeal to customers and how to have that wow effect, but also, being very, very sensitive, right, with emotions.
What is the appetite now for foreign companies in China, for Western brands?
Well, I think that in the last couple of years, it has been a challenging time for foreign brands in China. I think after COVID, and I think that it's primarily because the domestic market in China has kind of slowed down. Consumer sentiment is still at a low point right now. But I don't want to say that it's only multinationals. I think Chinese companies, Chinese consumer brands in China are also having an equally tough time, right? When you are competing in China, it's not that people are thinking around, oh, am I buying a foreign brand versus buying a Chinese brand? I'm buying a brand with a price point and with the features and all that fits, what I want right now. So I think that it's really around what's fit for purpose for the Chinese consumers right now, in their psyche, in what they need, in what they think is their affordability, that actually poses the biggest challenge for both Chinese companies and multinational companies. That said, this year, I think that it has stabilized a little bit. I think that people feel like, I don't know the word we're out of the woods, but I think that certainly there is a little bit more of a optimism around. I see that in investors, I see that in the corporates, I see that in people who are thinking around putting in capex for the next couple of years. And I do think that stabilization, maybe we are on the path towards recovery here on the consumer side.
Do you think music or sports is something that transcends borders? And I say that because NBA will be re-entering the Chinese market come October, playing for the first time in a couple of years in Macau.
I think it'll be huge. I think sports and to be honest, experiences is actually right now quite taking over physical goods, right, in China. If you look at travel, if you look at sports, right, if you look at unique experiences, if you look at even domestic travel in China to places that have never been, I think that actually has not stopped. That has been on a trajectory ever since the last couple of years, and I do think that will continue. So in China right now, we have a joke that if you are a runner, like every week there's a marathon somewhere that you can actually participate in. You see people running all over the place, running shoes and athleisure, right? You see that actually being the phenomenon right now. So I do think that the Chinese consumer is not spending. They're just choosing their avenues on where to spend and what they prioritize right now.
When you're talking about running, the first thing that came to my mind was the humanoid robots. There was that half marathon that was held in Beijing a couple months back, and then just this past weekend, there was the, I don't want to call it Olympics, but it was, the games that was
right.
taking place there. In terms of the AI race and, China being very much visible and at the forefront here, is this something that you're watching?
For sure, right? I think, but it's not only in China, right? This AI, or Gen AI, what we can do with agentic AI and all that, I think it's a global phenomenon, right? At McKinsey, all of our clients around the world, we're all talking about it. Now, in China, of course, we're talking about it. And we talk about it because I think a lot of Chinese companies in the past 15 years really enjoyed the ride of the internet and social and the mobile internet, right? Especially around how you can do payments and purchases and all that. I think that a lot of them see the AI and what it can do to be another acceleration of what they can do, right? And in Chinese companies, they always think a little bit around what's the next thing I got to get on because I don't want to miss it. And right now, I would say that AI is definitely one of the hot areas. I think humanoid robots and all that is one phenomenon of the AI trend. But I think within businesses, the way how we can use data, how we can use AI and all that is definitely a growing trend in China right now.
Does it matter who does it first? Because the world was really shocked when we saw the DeepSeek moment in February earlier this year, the fact that a Chinese company can do more with less.
I can tell you that Chinese companies are very competitive among themselves. When DeepSeek came out, they weren't thinking around how I can rank in the global order of things. They're trying to figure out how do I make money in China and how do I not make money, how do I survive in China right now? So I want to say in this AI race, right, if you think about a single individual actor, it's not geopolitics that they think about. It's around survival, right, and capitalism that they're thinking about, right? All of these AI companies, a lot of them, are actually in China, trying to work to make processes more efficient, trying to get to more consumers, trying to figure out how they can be the first one out of the hundreds who are doing exactly what they're doing. So I would say that, yes, when we take a step back, we look at the global landscape and say, well, which countries are doing better in this? At an individual level, everyone is trying to survive because it is very brutal right now out there in the Chinese AI world where they're all competing ferocity with each other, and every single day you see a new company coming out with something different.
Are foreign companies, U.S. companies, going into the Chinese market as well?
I think U.S. companies, at this stage, probably on the AI side, is definitely a little bit of a two worlds. There's the U.S., I would say acceleration happening, right, and this Chinese one. But I would say that if you think about global interest in Chinese technology, I would say in the last 6 months, you see it in the capital markets, right? You see it in the stock markets, right? I talked to a lot of private equity firms, and there's a renewed interest after a period of where are we going to allocate capital to China. I think right now there's a little bit more interest. Say, well, these companies are actually pretty good, and they are actually doing things at a very cost-effective way. They are actually quite, and maybe if you think about the robotic space, right? I do think that they are coming up with products at a price point that is almost unbeatable globally because of the supply chain, because of the competition. So people are looking at that and saying that, well, do I need to have some exposure in that space? And I think that for global companies, the investment appetite, right, for looking at China, especially around these areas, is growing.
But is there any hesitancy for partnerships or JVs in U.S.-China engagement? And I bring up CK Hutchison because they want to invite a Chinese strategic investor.
It's a more complicated world right now, for sure, right? And as any Chinese corporation, right, as they think about shareholders, as they think about what they want to think about in terms of expansion and partners, of course, politics need to play a role. We all have to, right? And it's not only Chinese companies. I think every single company around the world, as you think about how you can, venture forward, I think geopolitics will be a part of the consideration. For Chinese companies, it is a sensitive time. They are very good in what they do, and they got to figure out how do I become welcomed around the world. I do think that there is a bit of phenomena that they're so good that in some parts of the world, they're feared. They're not welcomed. And I think that they got to figure out, like, what do I do as a corporate to make myself more welcomed? What do I need to do with local communities, employees, sharing, and shareholder structure and all that in order so that I can continue to be a global company.
Joe, thank you very much for your time today. We got a lot through in the time that you spent with us. We've been speaking with Joe Ngai from McKinsey. And that'll do it for this edition of the China Connection. I'm Emily Tan here. Do keep it on CNBC. Inside India is coming up next.